Imagine a day where children are guided and nurtured in a way that honors their unique humanness. A day where, instead of being expected to change in order to fit in, children can be met right where they're at. Welcome to Where They're Planted, a podcast for parents and care providers of unique children. Caring for a child with a developmental, emotional, or behavior challenge, a neurodiverse brain, or difficult early life experiences can be confusing and exhausting. On this podcast, we'll help your child flourish and strengthen their roots by helping you not only understand them, but also gain the skills to help them bloom where they're planted. We'll use brain science, nervous system tools, collaborative strategy sessions, and a deep understanding of the developmental process to create a fertile environment around your child in order to nurture their growth. I am your host, Jen Bluske, an occupational therapist with over 25 years of experience and a parent coach. My most closely held title, however, is that of a single mom of 2 thriving adopted kids, so I have walked this walk. I am truly excited to share, teach, and dive into these important topics on each episode.
Welcome back to Where They're Planted. I'm excited to be starting our first series today on a topic that is becoming more prevalent in our work. PDA, or Pathological Demand Avoidance, is a diagnostic category that was first described in the UK as a variant of autism. PDA can be defined as a pattern of behavior in which kids go to extremes to ignore or avoid anything they perceive as demanding. Pathological demand avoidance is most often seen in people with autism. While not included yet in the DSM or the official diagnostic category in the United States, the term PDA is being used to describe a profile of children with a persistent drive for autonomy, which can have a dramatic impact on their ability to function within their daily tasks or even participate in the activities of children, such as school, play, or family time. We will spend the next few episodes diving into the category of PDA, calling up experts to help lend some understanding, and finally have a discussion around how we can meet kids with PDA right where they're planted. Today, we are starting with our first expert, a mom who we work closely with, who is living the experience of parenting a child with PDA. As we always do on this podcast, I want to begin with a focus on the parent as the guide to change in their child. Welcome, Mel.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, excited. So I didn't give much of an introduction because I want to let you introduce yourself. So tell us a little bit about you.
Absolutely. So I live in Madison, Wisconsin with my husband and my 2 children, an 8-year-old girl with PDA and my 4-year-old, soon to be 5-year-old son who is not PDA. We've been living in Madison for about 4 years now, and we moved here right during the pandemic.
That had to be challenging. So I want to start, as I sort of prefaced in the intro, I gave just a tiny little introduction of PDA because, right, this is a super big topic. But really what I want to focus on today is you as the expert. And so let's start by just telling me a little bit about thus far what your experience has been with raising your daughter who has PDA.
I mean, that's such a weighty question. I mean, there's so many different layers to how to answer that. So it's been a journey foremost. And I would say mostly it's been a mindset shift and a spousal shift in how you relate to each other and how you relate to everybody else in the world externally. So it's been really a process of discovery, trying to figure out which pieces of advice would work for our family, and then recognizing that I myself have the autonomy to say no, that's not right, because there is no right answer. There's no script.
That's so lovely that there is no script, because that's part of what I really want to talk about in this series is, even within this world of PDA, every kid and every family is so different. So let's break it down a little bit then. Let's talk about what things you were noticing in your daughter, or what was popping up as you were trying to parent, or as you are trying to parent, that made you wonder, like, what's going on here? Is there something, does she fit this profile?
That's a lovely question. Let me maybe answer that by going back in time, just sort of from the beginning.
Yeah.
I was so super proud of my little toddler. She seemed more awesome than other kids. in so many ways. She was more sensitive. She was more perceptive. She was more everything. And from like my biased proud mom view, it was like, wow, my kid's like really cool. She was studying my faces, and if she was looking at me, she would be like, what kind of face are you making? And then at school, when she went to daycare, she was fitting in great, and she was, doing her own thing, and the teachers were always like, that's an independent kid you've got. She's not following that little crowd of girls. She's doing her own thing. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. You be you, girl. And so she was always been like a little bit more independent and perceptive. And then it wasn't until we moved to Wisconsin, because we were living in California, I had my newborn son. February 2020, we moved to Madison, across the country. I had a 3-month-old. My husband had, quit his job. He was on parental leave. Everything changed. And all of a sudden, this one-on-one, I think this automatic accommodation that I was just like inherently giving because we're so tuned into each other emotionally, I wasn't able to do the same level because I wasn't regulated myself either, because it was the pandemic and we were a little scared and nervous and like in a new town, and I didn't have a job, and I also had a newborn that was waking up every hour throughout the night. And so all of a sudden it was like, wait, the strategies that I didn't even know were strategies, something like is not working. And it was like my child collapsed. Like a dying star, she collapsed unto herself, and she cried for 5 months straight and basically didn't stop.
And so I'm hearing that, in your experience, I love this. And the first time I met you, Mel, I remember this, that you said to me, my kid is so cool. She's so perspective. I remember that's the first thing you told me. And I think that that's just so powerful that you're able to see your daughter for all of her amazingness as well, right? Like she has this like spark. And then, right, environment changed, as you said, some of those supports that you just inherently were giving shifted. And then she got to the point of collapse. What did you start seeing outside of the house? What did you start seeing became more challenging for her?
Well, and that's part of the challenge, is that there was no outside of the house. If you think back to the summer of 2020, I had no reference points all of a sudden. She missed almost all of 4K. She started going in January. And so she missed more than the first half of it. And the rest of 4K, the teacher was like, yeah, we can support her. She sort of just did her own thing. And it was like, within the realm of reason. But I did have her going to an occupational therapist because there was so much emotional dysregulation. And there were also some sensory things around like loud noises and just being overwhelmed. And so went to an occupational therapist. Occupational therapist is like, oh, yes, executive function is a challenge. She can't be told to get dressed. She needs the steps. Let's give her a routine. And I'm like, honey, she can't even hear the word shirt without crying. It's not about the order of operations here. Like, we're talking a completely different language. And it sort of just never fit until we got to kindergarten and 5K. And then the teacher flagged her as, let's get an intervention team here. And I'm like, see, people outside the home are seeing something. It's not just me.
That's a big deal. It's not just you, because I think that I've heard families and parents say this over and over again of, people not experiencing or not seeing the same thing that you're seeing until they are.
It is unbelievable how alone and isolating it feels. And then to have somebody like literally bear witness to what's going on, it's so validating that yes, it's not just my terrible parenting, because all these other parents are taking care of 2 kids at the same time. And I'm like, I can't take care of these kids at the same time. Like, what is wrong with me that this is not adding up? And I'm a doer. I know how to get things done. If there's something I don't know how to do, I figure out a solution. And it was like, there's no pieces of the puzzle that make this okay and safe for everybody. What am I doing wrong?
Yeah. This idea that the ability to just do more, right? Or just do better isn't necessarily going to be the support especially with our kids with a PDA profile. Right?
That there's no strategy you can employ. When my kids were bad at sleeping, I got some advice on sleep training, and we did the playbook and we followed the steps, and my kids are great sleepers. It was like, there's no strategy to employ here. There's no like, here's the set of solutions that I can use. Nothing that I do can possibly ever add up to it being a safe environment with one parent.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to then sort of bridge into providers and bridge into the journey of like finding something that's of support for you and for your daughter and for your family. I know that, I have enough information to know that you have been on a journey with providers to try to figure this out. Let's start with, what has your experience been with providers and figuring out who to have on your team with you and how?
I guess I'll start by saying that I have a background in science. I am an expert is to be trusted person. I'm inherently tuned towards like, I don't have experience in this area, somebody else does, so I'm going to listen to that perspective. And so that's the perspective that I came into this with. 2 occupational therapists told me executive functioning is the main source. The school team told me it's mostly sensory. None of that felt right to me, but I listened to them and I did the things. And I felt both judged and confused because I guess I'm not doing it the right way. Like when they say, the expert says she really needs a schedule, a visual schedule, and a routine. And we do it, and it's as though it makes everything worse. And I'm being told, well, you're probably not doing it the right way. And so it felt like a lot of gaslighting at the beginning, because I'm a person who tries to find the expert, and the experts are telling me something and it doesn't work and it's not even close to working, but they're telling me that no, this is right. Just stick with it. And even when she was diagnosed with autism, we go to the mental health therapy that specializes in autism, where they use a behavior-based lens. And I keep getting told, she needs a behavioral therapist. And the ABA approach is, what's really going to turn this around. And everything in my mind was like, it's not behavior, because she's not even thinking about it. She's not, I could see how instantaneously things happen for her. And I'm like, you cannot train that out of you. Like, it's not possible. But, the expert's telling me that. So we tried it. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so it's been really, really difficult to feel like all the experts are telling me one thing, but that doesn't work, but I don't know what would,
Right. Well, and I feel like, this is part of this piece that, here at CTN, parents are the experts in their own kids. Yeah, we have some like education and knowledge around nervous system and different strategy, but what I'm hearing is that you needed to be seen in your experience in order to create shift for your daughter.
What I think the most important part of the searching for the expert that can be on your team piece was that a lot of the advice that we got was very specific to the lens of the expert. And so when we went to the behavioral therapist, they wanted to focus on shifting certain behaviors. When we went on to the occupational therapist, it was about sensory. When we went to the mental health therapist, it was about emotional dysregulation. Everyone has their little lane that they're looking at. And there's no one on my side saying, like, a gut check of landscape level view, like, what do we have here? And you think that you have like a developmental pediatrician on your side. You think that you have that advocate, but you don't. There's no one who's like, let's like triage this and put it in the right lane, because there's a lot of things we could do here, but which is the most important piece to start with? And how do you layer on services, and how do you have them complement each other instead of working at odds with each other? And so not knowing who to trust, it was like, I don't know where to even start. If nothing's working, where do you even go?
Makes perfect sense. And so within that journey that I know you've been on for some time, where are you at now? What are you finding that has usefulness? As parents probably are listening who might be at the beginning of are beginning to be like, I wonder if this is something that's going on for my child, right? There's all these professionals and then there's all the TikToks, right? There's all of the things coming at you. How did you settle with something that made sense?
So this sounds so, I don't know if I want to say this on a podcast, but doing my own research and that sounds like I don't trust the experts, which I do. But what I realized is that there are certain things that require a whole system approach and require the whole family structure awareness.
Okay, let's talk about that.
The biggest flag for me when I look at providers is, are you giving advice that is the science and the scenario that, like, the guidance that the book tells you to give, or are you probing deep questions about what works for your family and why or why not this approach might work? Like, a really quick example here is, like, my daughter, at one point when we were seeing the behavioral therapist, we were troubleshooting with her because this kid was getting out of bed between 10 and 20 times in the evening. This after, I cannot convey to you the amount of relief I had when she was unconscious. Like, the amount of burden it is to have that one-on-one co-regulation all day, the unpredictability of you never know what's going to happen, who's going to be violent, and to what emotional, like, abuse is going to be happening, all of the things that are happening. And then to go to bed and then to have it start again in 10 minutes. Words can't express, like, it's like you're at war. Yes.
It's a trauma.
And it feels like gunshots every time you hear that door open. And the behavioral therapist is like, yeah. Well, did you just consider letting her stay up? It seems like she needs more connection with you. This kid couldn't get enough one-on-one time with me in general. Like, I had, 100% of the day. So yeah, connection might be an issue, the quality connection, etc. But that advice is not based in reality. It's as though she would have told me to, like, build a rocket ship to Mars. Like, I can't be with this kid anymore. Like, I can't do that. That's not a possibility. But you don't know what it's like if that's what you think is real. So it's like, can you understand where the family is and what's possible for a family before I'll listen to you?
Because the reality is our best support for our kids, right? Especially our kids with a PDA profile, is a family system that's supporting them. And so we have to focus on the family unit.
You would think that, but so many providers provide advice for the child only. And that is 90% of what you get with providers is, here's the recipe for this kid. Let's not talk about the ecosystem in which this kid lives, but if you want this kid to do this thing or be this person or gain this skill, this is what you do for this kid. Instead of, this kid is in a field with other flowers and interacts with the rest of the ecosystem, and not everything is possible. Let's talk about that.
And so you had brought up co-regulation, right? As you're co-regulating, she needs co-regulation in this work that you've been doing. And I know that this has been more than just your daughter. Like, this is the whole system that's been doing this work, the whole family system, the whole social structure around your daughter. How has it shifted your parenting or not? How has it impacted, you talk about, we're not providing just strategies to your daughter, but we're doing more than that. Let's talk about how it's shifted things.
I mean, in every single way, it's shifted my parenting. When you become a parent, you envision the kind of parent that you want to be. And I do think that a lot of parents fall into the trap of parenting the way they want to parent versus parenting the child that they have. And those are two really different things. And so I knew that I needed to adapt and to model the flexibility that I want to see in my children. But adapting your parenting is really hard, and it makes you question a lot about your values. And I mean, if I had to distill it down, there's a couple of different pillars that I draw from in order to reach a parenting structure that approaches working for our family. But the first pillar is the mindset shift, because it's so much deep journey into like being okay with what you're doing emotionally. Do you remember that parent video call we had one time? And I was saying, I'm having such a hard time connecting with my kid, but not even connecting, like even liking her and being okay with her, because you can't show empathy for somebody that you're so angry at. And your response was like, it's kind of like having a family member with an addiction. And that's what unconditional love is. And I'm like, yes, that really resonates with me. How do you find sympathy and love and show up for somebody every single day when they continually hurt you? You don't expect any love back from them. They physically hurt you, they emotionally hurt you, and you give and you give and you give, and you don't get anything back, and you get to a place where you're not even expecting anything back. But you still have peace with that, and you still show up every single day with deep empathy. How do you do that? And that's the journey, is like, how do you find that mindset that you feel okay with doing that?
And it's beautifully said. It's that mindset shift. I don't think there's an easy answer to it. And I think it's everything within. Yeah.
It's everything. And
especially within this profile, right? Within this PDA profile, it's everything.
Because, one thing that helps is thinking about how I'm making a cost benefit decision that benefits me. So I can be okay with what's going on, and I can allow things that pre having kids I would never assume that I would ever allow in my entire life, because I'm saying, if I let this happen, I might not trigger a panic attack. If I don't let this happen, she's going to have a panic attack, and she still might get the thing in the end. So I might as well be at peace with allowing it up front, because the opportunity cost of not doing it is higher than me just allowing it on the onset. And then it's like, I made a decision versus feeling like I'm a prisoner to my child. I intentionally allowed this instead of it happened and somebody else controlled it.
Yes, which then is the co-regulation, is the parent-child give-take, as opposed to this constant feeling like you're never having any say or any control, frankly, over anything in your own life, right? Because we all need autonomy in our own lives.
And it's totally the getting stuck in the I shoulds, the land of I should. It shouldn't be this hard. I shouldn't have to. She shouldn't do this. You get really stuck in the feeling sorry for yourself in the I should stage. Better for me to just say, this is my reality today. I am allowing this to happen today. And then I have my own autonomy that I said yes to this intentionally. Because my own internal dialogue matters so much.
Like, again, we all need autonomy in our world, including the parent who's raising a child with a PDA profile. Let's talk about, if you were to hand over some initial nuggets. I mean, we haven't even gotten into what's working and what's shifting and all of those pieces. But for now, if you were to hand over some nuggets to maybe you, what was that when we started talking a year and a half ago, or to another parent who's listening who might be having some aha moments around, oh, either A, does my child have a PDA profile, or B, I've just been given this label, right? And there's such strong opinions and professionals around it. What would that advice be?
I think it's really interesting, the narrative around PDA right now as it relates to the concept of low demand parenting. You don't have a formal diagnosis, like you said. So what a lot of people are doing are using social networks, which is how I find almost all my information, experts online, other parents online. And so you have all of this unfiltered dialogue about low demand parenting. And you have to really sift through this. But one thing that I think is really curious is the focus on the low demand piece of this, because that's in the name. But what I have found is that has not been the biggest piece for me in terms of having things feel more okay. the bigger piece for me has been thinking about my kid and the relationship with my kid as maybe like an iceberg, where like being proactive and the building up below the surface and the trust and the connection has been a way bigger deal in terms of getting her to feel more regulated more of the time than reducing demands. Not that that's not a part of it, because it's definitely a huge part of what we do is like eliminating anything unnecessary. Absolutely. But me focusing on trust and connection has been the bigger mind space for me because it takes so much of my mental energy. Sending constant signals of safety. I am a safe person. And so how can I find different ways for her to feel connected and trust me? Like smiling at her. She needs a 10-to-1 ratio of, at least 10-to-1 of positive interactions to negative interactions. And that is saying something because there's a lot of negative interactions. Constantly socially inappropriate, violent, like a lot of behaviors that you have to stop for safety's sake. So you have to magnify that by 10 in terms of signals of safety. So when I look at her, my eyes have to be wide and sparkling. I have to do sign language, I love you, 10 times a day. When she comes in a room, I have to say in a bright voice, hi, my love. When she comes home from school, I have to have a smile on my face that feels genuine because it's not okay to fake it. She knows the empathy with this child is unbelievable. You cannot fake this. It has to be genuine. And so the amount of global comments, oh my gosh, you're a brilliant child. The amount of yeses, I can't believe you thought of that. Yes, that's correct. But also this, even when it's a completely incorrect thing she said, I have to validate it. I validate everything before I would ever correct anything. So all of these signals throughout the day, it comes to maybe 300 times a day. I have to signal safety verbally, non-verbally, all day long. And so that to me has been the bigger part is signaling trust, safety, and connection constantly so that she can feel safe that when I ask her to do something, I can be trusted to have her do it.
That's so well said that there's many layers and that idea that we're creating safety. Right, we're going right back to attachment and connection and regulation, right, as the foundation, in addition to watching what the demands are, right, paying very close attention to that. And I just think that that's lovely and a lovely way to just think about how we can create that tiny shift, right? Create the slow, consistent shift for kids, especially when parents are just starting maybe this journey or this process with their kiddos. Anything else? Yeah.
There is another part though, that besides the trust and connection piece, which is huge, the other thing that I think is really interesting in like the low demand space that I see a lot of people talking about is, how do I get my kid to do this? Or this needs to happen. How do I get my kid to do that? And I won't touch that piece of it because it's impossible and there's no right choice. And we can talk about like how I get my kid to do things, but that's not the point right now. The point here is that if you had a child in a wheelchair, you would not question the fact that you guys are not doing 10-mile hikes every weekend. You are having a different life. There are structural changes that your life has to have. And I see a lot of people getting stuck, and myself have like spent a very long time being stuck in if I would only do this, I would create a scenario which we could be typical. Instead of getting to the acceptance place of our life needs to structurally change to accommodate our reality. And now there are big structural things about our family that we don't do, or we do in a very different way. And I just have to make peace with that instead of trying to shove this peg in a hole and say, how do I make this happen? It's, I guess we're not doing that thing.
Yeah.
And it's sad because that thing is we don't socialize with other families. I don't get to make friends. I don't get to talk about parenting with other people. And I don't speak to my husband except on like business related, like family related matters unless the kids are not with us. We don't have conversations. And I've just given that up because it's like, if I were to say something emotional or charged or even something that's like close to my heart, it's a 95% chance that I'm going to get interrupted because my child has seen that my attention is divided. And so I get these breaks in connection with my husband that are not worth the cost of doing it. It's so much safer to just wait and not do it. And so the result is I don't talk to my husband unless my kids aren't around. And that's a heartbreaking reality. And that is what it is.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm hearing you say that you're meeting your daughter right where she's at, and the impact, right? The impact to your family of what that means. And, you know, with the hope that we're able to scoop this little lady up and continue to help her know that she can have autonomy within safety eventually.
Yeah, that's the hope. And then, you know, part of my own internal journey, which, you know, people, there's no right way to think about this, but the way I think about it is that hope sits really close to expectation for me. And so it feels too scary to hope that things would be different. So I just focus on today. Today it's like this. And I don't think about the future because that feels a little too close to expectation. Or if I'm getting all this therapy for my daughter, maybe it will make a difference. Well, maybe, but let's not expect that.
Wow. I think that how you're thinking about it is lovely, and you are such an amazing mama to your girl. And we could talk so much more about therapy stuff, and I would like to, maybe in another episode. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy to share my perspective because this is just such a an isolating journey, and I do feel like I've been through it. So it's nice to be able to share it in a way that I know people will hear it, because there's so many people I can't share this with who don't
and I
get
think it's
it.
such a benefit to families who are listening. Thank you, Mel.
Where They're Planted is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Jen Bluske. Music is by Gaston Reen and Pod 5. Thank you for loving your child right where they're planted.